Well, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. And I'm going to read a little bit about her background. I think most of you probably remember Terri Watkins in many roles that she's had in the state of Oklahoma. And we feel very fortunate that she is now a part of the Department of Corrections family and has been helping us in a lot of ways. But for those of you that may not remember all of the different things that Terri has done, her hometown is Norman. And her university is Crimson and Cream of the University of Oklahoma. And that's really the only thing about Terri that, I have to struggle with. But other than that, Ms. Watkins received a degree in political science with a minor in journalism. She started a journalism career in Tulsa with a small radio station and continued doing radio in Oklahoma and Texas. She began working at KOCO Television in Oklahoma City to work on a story involving Oklahoma's juvenile treatment facilities. That story would earn the television station its first Peabody Award. And if I'm not mistaken, that was back when ultimately there was some federal lawsuits and there's some closures related to conditions of confinement. So it did change juvenile corrections in Oklahoma. During the 24 years Ms. Watkins worked at KOCO, she was involved in the investigations of Governor David Walters, State Treasurer Claudette Henry, State Treasurer Edward Ellis, and Adjunct General Tommy Alsop. She spent 3 years covering the Oklahoma City bombing, including the trials of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. Ms. Watkins is a member of the Oklahoma Journalism Hall of Fame and the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame. She has been a part of 2 Peabody Award-winning teams in the newsroom and was inducted into the Television Academy of Arts Silver Circle. After 30 years as a reporter, she now works in state government helping agencies do strategic planning and public relations. And, as I said earlier, she has been with the Oklahoma Department of Corrections in this capacity for about a year. When our new director was appointed, she came in to assist in his transition and remains an important part of his executive team. So, she really goes well beyond in her media role. She really has a very active operational role, and so we're far more connected, I think, with Terri than we have been in people similar to her position. So she is here today and going to share some information about what's going on in the Department of Corrections. And Terri, thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me up. I've got to tell you guys, I was telling Janice, I was with the Lieutenant Governor on Monday. And he said, what are you going to be up to this week? And I said, well, I'm going to Alva on Wednesday. He said, oh, I love Alva. And they love their prison up there. And I went, oh, good. Because I get a little concerned about things like that. So please know that message of your community and your community's involvement with Janice and the facility has spread throughout the state of Oklahoma and is an example that we would like to use, but we don't try to tell people they're not doing it right, but with other communities that have correctional facilities. Yesterday, we gave our budget presentation to the Oklahoma State Senate. And so what I thought I'd do today, since it kind of gives you a little bit of an overview, because you know what you have here, I wanted to just give you an idea of kind of what we're dealing with statewide. And I'm not a huge fan of PowerPoints, but with this much information, I wanted to kind of do that. I also brought up for Janice today the new brochures for the Bill Johnson facility. One of the things we're doing is a lot of the brochures that we had in the past didn't really talk about your specific facility. So this one will do that, and hopefully we'll continue to do that in the future. And I'll kind of go through this as quickly as I can and then let you guys answer any questions so that I can then turn around and have you ask them of her because she knows and I don't. Yeah, it's the only other line I have is I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. Okay, let's see if, there we go. This will give you an idea of how large the Department of Corrections is. It is, while many state agencies have larger budgets, it is technically the 4th largest state agency because of the number of employees and because we are solely funded with state dollars. So we are currently at the FY15 budget It was 470,009. We've got 28,000 plus prisoners behind bars. That does not count the people that are out on probation or parole or GPS or any of the other programs that are offered. That's another 25,000. 3,786 DOC employees. It's a number we would like to dramatically increase, especially as it comes to correctional officers. So we've got an offender growth, just growth. This is more than what we're letting out, expected to be 1,140. And Oklahoma has one of the lowest recidivism rates in the country, and that's 22%. And if you ask me, you want to ask me why we have the lowest recidivism? Because we have one of the highest incarceration rates in the country. And that's the good news, bad news when you're dealing with something like recidivism.
I assume that's taken into account of some of the new things that they're doing
with
parole and...
It is, but many of the new things that have been talked about for the past 2 years and many of the things that your representative and speaker want to do have not begun yet. The funding has not been put in place. The programs have not been put in place. We've talked about them, but we haven't gotten there yet. One of the problems that we're going to face in the coming 2 years is the Justice Reinvestment Act that you hear so much, initiative you hear so much about. It's going to cost money. But in the meantime, we've got to find a place for that 1,140 above and beyond what we have right now. So you're actually going to end up with us asking to fund 2 separate areas at the same time, because we will not, because Texas didn't, see the effects of something like a JRI for anywhere from 3 to 4 years. Texas has been able to save hundreds of millions. Well, it's Texas. You know, they blow it all out of proportion anyway. But it's over $100 million and shut down 2 prisons. But their JRI program is over 5 years old now. And they put literally hundreds of millions of dollars into it in the first place. It's a decision the state of Oklahoma is going to have to make. And we're going to have to make some decisions. The areas of need that we're going to be going for are, of course, employee salaries. There was a study done by West Virginia recently that they sent me a copy of. We are not at the bottom on salaries. We're 5th from the bottom on salaries. Now, we have to take that all into perspective, because we're not going to pay what Massachusetts pays. The cost of living in Massachusetts is different from Oklahoma. But when a 25-year-old can make $40,000 in the oil field, and they'll make $24,000 as a starting correctional officer, you're not going to be able to convince many 25-year-olds that, oh, look at the long-term benefits of a secured retirement. I know what I did at 25, and it had nothing to do with the long-term benefits of a secured retirement, despite what my mother told me. I became a reporter. How stupid was that? When you talk about dealing with that 1,140 offenders, you're also talking about offender growth resources. We have to feed them. We have to clothe them. We house them. It costs electricity. It does all those kinds of things. Health services. You all know how much, with your businesses, health costs have risen in the past few years. That's absolutely true inside the prison system also. The other thing you have is a very large percentage of population that really hadn't taken that good a care of themselves. We've got drug and alcohol problems. We've got mental health problems. Those are very expensive things to treat, and we are required to treat them. Offender programs and education. Janice is doing a great job with that. But right now, I am sorry to say, in many of our facilities, program rooms are being used to house inmates because we're out of space. I'll get to that in a second. Community sentencing programs, we'd like to expand them because that gets them out of beds, that gets them into jobs. Many of them need that kind of job training back out on the street. So we need additional areas we can use for community sentencing. And that takes facilities, it takes staff, it takes job training, all of which has had to be cut back in order to deal with other needs. Infrastructure and equipment. You want to talk about infrastructure?
Go ahead.
I got to speak to Leadership Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago, and they got a tour of the Oklahoma State Prison. We've got roofs that are leaking. The facility that you have here is the newest minimum security facility in the state. The newest medium security facility in the state was built in the 1970s. So if your house was built in the 1970s, you know in a prison system with that kind of turnover and that kind of movement, what type of facility needs we are facing. We've got locks that have got to be replaced. We've got roofs that have got to be replaced. We've got kitchens that have got to be replaced. My dishwasher goes out every 6 years, but that may just be me. Security needs. That's a twofold